What happens when the person you've supported your entire life becomes the anchor weighing you down? This is the story of how one birthday dinner, 5 cutting words, and $36,000 in receipts finally pushed me to reclaim my life. My name is Bree, and I turned 32 on the day I finally broke. I still remember the weight of the words as they slipped from my mother's lips, barely audible above the restaurant chatter. 5 simple words that ignited the resentment I had been suppressing for years. The candles on my birthday cake flickered between us as I made a decision that would change everything. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever had to make a difficult choice about family boundaries. Life was normal, predictable even, until my parents divorced when I was 15. The split wasn't particularly dramatic, just the slow deterioration of 2 people who had fallen out of love. Mom would say things like, "Be understanding with your brother. This is harder on him." Initially, it was just to have my own spending money, but soon I was contributing to household expenses. Nothing major, just picking up groceries occasionally or buying school supplies. While my friends were enjoying the full university experience, I was juggling classes with 2 part-time jobs. Meanwhile, Ryan had started his first year at community college, only to drop out after 1 semester. It wasn't the right fit, Mom explained, making excuses I willingly accepted. This became a pattern. Ryan would start something vocational school, another college program, an apprenticeship only to abandon it within months. Each attempt was met with the same enthusiasm from our mother. I stayed focused. I was proud of what I had accomplished through hard work and persistence. At 27, I finally moved into my own apartment, a small 1-bedroom place that was nothing fancy but entirely mine. I thought this milestone would signal a shift in responsibilities, but instead, the expectations only grew. When Ryan lost his job at the electronics store, the 3rd position he had been fired from that year, my mother called me. "Maybe you could cover his rent for a month or 2. That temporary arrangement stretched into 3 years. "I just need to get through this week," he would text. Or there was an unexpected expense. Or my personal favorite, "I swear this is the last time." It never was the last time. "He has such vision," she would gush during our weekly calls. What she never acknowledged was that at 29, Ryan had never held a job longer than 6 months. I convinced myself it was temporary, that eventually he would get it together, that family takes care of family. I ignored the growing resentment, the sleepless nights worrying about my own financial future, the dreams I had put on hold. Every time I got close to my goal, another Ryan emergency would arise. I hadn't taken a real vacation in 5 years, settling instead for the occasional weekend trip within driving distance. Nothing extravagant, just a reservation at my favorite Italian restaurant. I shouldn't have been surprised, but somehow it still stung. As I was getting ready for dinner, my phone buzzed with another text from Ryan. "Hey sis, hate to ask, but I'm in a bit of a situation. Could you transfer $300? Promise I'll pay you back next week." I stared at the message, my finger hovering over the screen. I transferred the money without replying, a familiar hollow feeling settling in my stomach. As I applied my makeup, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. When had I started looking so tired? I thought about the life I had imagined for myself at 32, the milestones I thought I would have reached by now. I had wanted to be a homeowner by 30. The mortgage calculator on my phone showed that with what I had spent on Ryan in the past year alone, I could have made a substantial down payment on a modest house in a nice neighborhood. Instead, I lived in a rental apartment with walls I couldn't paint and a leaky faucet the landlord kept promising to fix. I had wanted to visit Europe to see the art and architecture I had only read about in books. I had wanted to go back to school part-time to earn the credentials that would allow me to move into healthcare administration at a higher level. All these deferred dreams weighed on me as I drove to the restaurant. I tried to push them aside to focus on celebrating another year of life, but they clung to me like shadows. I arrived to find my mother and Ryan already seated at the table. As we settled into conversation, Ryan dropped his news. "So, I have some exciting updates," he announced, as if continuing a discussion we had already been having. My heart sank. "It's just not challenging me creatively," he said, as if selling laptops and printers should somehow be a creative endeavor. "Plus, the hours are killing me. 9 to 5 is such an outdated concept. Ryan has always been more of a free spirit." I'm actually thinking of starting my own thing, he continued. Something in the digital space, content creation maybe, or social media management. Every time Ryan quit a job, the financial burden on me increased. More loans that were never repaid. That sounds interesting, I managed, because what else could I say? Enough, it said. The waitress approached our table with menus and a warm smile. The irony of her suggesting I treat myself when I would be paying for all three of us wasn't lost on me. Still, I nodded politely and ordered the chicken parmesan, my usual choice, more for its reasonable price than my actual preference. My mother selected one of the more expensive pasta dishes. My friends arrived shortly after we ordered, bringing actual gifts. Their thoughtfulness made the absence of anything from my family even more glaring. The conversation flowed as we ate, though I noticed how my mother continually steered it back to Ryan. When Megan asked about my recent work certification, my mother nodded briefly before interrupting. That reminds me, Ryan. Tell everyone about your new project idea. It's going to require some initial investment, he explained, cutting into his steak. He's always been a visionary, my mother beamed. I pushed my chicken around my plate, my appetite diminishing with each passing moment. The weight of expectations of always being the responsible one while watching Ryan receive praise for simply existing pressed down on me. As the main course dishes were cleared, the waitress returned with a small chocolate cake I had pre-ordered and paid for when making the reservation. It wasn't fancy, just a simple round cake with "Happy Birthday" written in white icing. That looks kind of small, Ryan commented as the cake was placed in front of me. It's perfect, I said firmly, unwilling to let him dampen this small pleasure I had arranged for myself. You could have gone for something more exciting, my mother chimed in. Remember those elaborate theme cakes we used to get Ryan for his birthdays? My own birthdays had always been more modest affairs. The accusation hit me like a physical blow. Jealous of Ryan, the brother whose rent I paid, whose car I financed, whose emergencies constantly drained my savings. Years of resentment, of swallowed protests, of deferred dreams, all converged in that moment. Then let him pay his own bills, I said, my voice quiet but firm. What did you say? I said, I repeated louder this time, if Ryan has so much potential, then let him pay his own bills. Someone's grumpy on her birthday, he said, attempting to diffuse the situation. I blew out the candles in one decisive breath. We should talk about my investment in your new business venture, my mother said to Ryan, clearly eager to move past the awkward moment. I was hoping Bree might want to get in on the ground floor. It could be really profitable for her. I stared at him incredulously. After everything, after the thousands of dollars I had already given him with nothing to show for it, he was asking for more. What do you think, Bree? My mother prompted. For once. The absurdity of her statement was the final straw. I reached for my purse, pulled out enough cash to cover my portion of the meal plus a generous tip, and placed it on the table. But we haven't had cake yet, my mother protested. I'll call you both tomorrow. With that, I walked out of the restaurant, ignoring my mother's calls behind me. For the first time in years, I had put myself first. The dam had broken. The drive home was a blur. Tears streamed down my face as years of suppressed emotions finally found release. By the time I pulled into my apartment complex, my sadness had crystallized into something else. I dug through bank statements, credit card bills, and Venmo transfers, every record I could find. In the past year alone, I had spent $36,400 on my brother. It was enough for a master's degree. It was enough for the European vacation I had dreamed of since college. No more, I decided. Not another dollar. 4. His credit card minimum payments totaling $300. And the list went on, including streaming services, a gym membership, and even utility bills I often covered. Next to each item, I noted what needed to be done to disentangle myself. For some, it would be as simple as removing my payment information. For others, like the apartment where I was the guarantor, it would require more formal notifications. Though it was after hours, I left a detailed voicemail explaining that I would no longer be serving as guarantor for Ryan's lease. I followed up with an email stating the same, making it clear that I would fulfill my obligation through the end of the current month, but not beyond. Next came the credit cards. I removed my automatic payments from the 3 cards I had been paying minimums on. The car payment was trickier. My name was on the loan alongside Ryan's, a mistake I had made when he insisted he needed reliable transportation for job interviews. I couldn't simply remove myself, but I could stop making payments. I sent a formal letter to the finance company explaining that I would no longer be contributing to the loan, with a copy to Ryan. I removed him from my phone family plan, effective at the end of the current billing cycle. Our one joint checking account, which I had opened to make transferring money to him easier, was closed. I transferred the remaining balance less than $100 to my personal account. By 3 o'clock in the morning, I had methodically severed every financial tie I could. My next step was composing an email to both Ryan and my mother. I wrote and rewrote it several times, trying to find the right balance between firmness and compassion. Was I really going to do this? What if Ryan ended up homeless? What if my mother never spoke to me again? I thought of all the years I had put everyone else's needs before my own. I thought of my dwindling savings, my deferred dreams, the growing resentment that was poisoning my relationship with my family. My mother's calls and texts followed soon after. What have you done? We need to talk about this. You're being incredibly selfish. I turned off my phone, something I had never done before. Despite the emotional turmoil of the night, I fell into a deep, dreamless sleep, more restful than any I had experienced in recent memory. When I woke up hours later, I felt something unexpected. Relief. The constant background anxiety that had become so familiar I barely noticed it anymore had lifted. Now I just had to stand my ground. The next week was a storm of calls, texts, and unannounced visits. Ryan's first reaction was disbelief, followed by anger, then panic as he realized I was serious. You can't just cut me off without warning. I thought we were family. How could you do this to your brother? After everything we've been through as a family, I never raised you to be this heartless. When those didn't work, she escalated to involving other family members. The most difficult moment came when Ryan showed up at my workplace. Not until you fix this, he insisted, his voice too loud for the professional setting. They're going to evict me, Bree. Is that what you want? For your brother to be homeless? We can talk about this later, but not here, I replied, maintaining my composure despite the scene he was creating. The office manager appeared beside me, her expression concerned. He left, but not before delivering a parting shot, loud enough for everyone to hear. Hope you're happy with yourself. Mom was right. You've always been jealous of me. Ryan told me what happened at your office, she began without preamble. Boundaries, she scoffed. Is that what your therapist calls abandoning your family? Because that's what you're doing. I hadn't mentioned seeing a therapist, though I had been considering it. I'm simply saying that at 29, Ryan needs to be responsible for his own expenses. You know how sensitive he is. So what happens when he gets evicted? When his car gets repossessed? Where is he supposed to go? Well, I can't take him in, she declared. My house isn't big enough. Still, the words stung, revealing just how conditional her love had always been. 2 weeks after my birthday dinner, I received notice that Ryan's apartment complex had begun eviction proceedings. Around the same time, Ryan's car was repossessed. I'm sorry you're going through this, Ryan, I said. The family drama reached its peak at Sunday dinner at my aunt's house. I was right about it being a setup. The entire extended family was there, and it quickly became clear that the meal was actually an intervention designed to make me see reason. My aunt spoke first. My uncle nodded in agreement. Family helps family. That's just how it works. One by one, they weighed in, echoing the same sentiments my mother had been bombarding me with for weeks. When the table finally fell silent, all eyes on me, I reached into my bag and pulled out my spreadsheet. I appreciate your concern, I began, but I'd like to share some context. I passed copies of the document around the table. This is a record of the financial support I've provided to Ryan over the past year. $36,400. That's more than half my annual salary after taxes. The silence that followed was deafening. This can't be right, my aunt finally said, though her tone lacked conviction. Every entry is documented, I assured her. Bank transfers, payment receipts, everything. Ryan, who had been uncharacteristically quiet throughout the intervention, stared at his plate. In all these years, you've never repaid a single loan. It's not like I don't want to be responsible, he said defensively. Because I never let you, I acknowledged. And that's on me. But it can't continue. Not complete agreement perhaps, but at least recognition that the situation was more complex than they had assumed. As we prepared to leave, my aunt pulled me aside. I had no idea it was this much, she admitted. Because I was taught that talking about money is inappropriate, I replied. Because I was taught that family doesn't keep score. Because I was taught that being the responsible one meant shouldering everyone else's burdens without complaint. I'm sorry, Bree. We should have seen what was happening. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was a start. As I drove home that night, I felt the first stirrings of hope that maybe, just maybe, this painful process would lead to positive change for everyone involved. 5 years have passed since that birthday. Sometimes I look back on that night and I hardly recognize the woman I was, simmering in silent resentment. My cozy bungalow, once a distant dream, is now filled with the warmth of my life. The work is challenging and fulfilling, and for the first time my paycheck feels entirely my own. My mother and I found our way back to each other slowly. After the intervention, she began seeing a counselor and realized how much of her own fear she had projected onto us. Our conversations are different now, based on a newfound respect. And Ryan, my free-spirited brother, truly found his calling, just not in the way anyone expected. After hitting rock bottom, he took that entry-level customer service job and discovered he was surprisingly good at it. He's a team lead now, happily married to that lovely veterinary technician, and last week, they asked me to be the godmother to their first child. At his wedding, he pulled me aside during the reception. You know, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Walking away from me was the most sisterly thing you've ever done. You didn't just save yourself, Bree. You gave me the chance to save myself. Our family isn't perfect, but it's real. It's honest. It was rebuilt on a foundation of healthy boundaries and genuine love, not just obligation. My journey from resentment to rebuilding proves that setting boundaries isn't about ending relationships, but about starting healthier ones. If my story resonated with you, hit that like button if you believe in the power of second chances. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice about family boundaries? And to make sure you don't miss our next story of strength and renewal, click that subscribe button and join our community. Thank you for listening, and remember that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself, and for others, is to finally say, enough.